All right, Taylor, I always like asking this question. There's no real direction to it, but I always like to know what people were like growing up. So when you think of kind of where you are now and what you were like when you were growing up, what really stands out to you about the childhood of Taylor Jenkins? Maybe some things that were important to you, just characteristics, whatever comes to mind when I ask you about what you were like growing up.
Well, Jared, thanks for having me. What a childhood growing up in St. Mark's. My family's actually still there. Very blessed, first and foremost. Very blessed, very, very fortunate, obviously. Great educational upbringing. If there were some things that I think back to, my family was my rock growing up. So many great memories with them. Traveled a lot when I was a young kid. Traveled domestically a little bit, but definitely overseas. Started off going to Mexico when I was a little kid, but then we really started branching out, going to Italy more and England and Ireland, and just getting to see different parts of the world was big for me. Canada. So kind of worldly was something that I really appreciated growing back, when I think back to growing up, and obviously with, young ones of my own, I hope that they get those experiences. A lot of diverse extracurriculars. My mom put me in so many different things when I was growing up. Obviously, sports is a passion of mine. Fell in love with baseball at a really, really young age. Dating back to t-ball. Slowly fell into love with basketball when I was kind of in the middle school, fifth, sixth grade, and then kind of carried that throughout. So sports has always been a big part of my life, but a lot of arts-related extracurriculars. I remember doing theater and tap dance camps when I was a kid, and just, I was always full of a lot of energy. And clearly my mom had to put me in some activities to keep that going, and, just to be able to have something outside of sports was big for me. I ended up playing in the band when I was in school, so kind of have, a little bit of that, fine art side, which is something that I remember a lot. And, so many great close friends, friendships have, I always talk about as a coach, relationships are so important to me. And, I think back to all the great friends that I have now and where those relationships started. And so many of them were in my childhood, dating back to, when I went to school at St. Mark's, from, lower school when I was in third grade to, boys at the time that I met when I was in middle school. So we all kind of grew up together and have a tight-knit group. And, most of those guys are still my best friends to this day, even going off to different colleges and different career paths. And really none of us live in the same cities these days, and, growing families of our own. So a lot of great family roots, friends rooted down in Dallas. Sports was big for me. Travel was big, and definitely the arts.
All right, so a few things from that. First of all, you had Mr. Jordan in third grade, right? You must have.
Yes, I did.
All right.
Yes, I did.
Frank Jordan, a legend at St. Mark's. So I guess with the let's start with the world travels. Sure. I'm sure we could spend hours talking about all these places, but was there one experience in a country that really stands out, or one that jumps to mind that you kind of took with you, and whether it was just an awesome experience or a learning experience? 'Cause I think, and you kind of touched on it, but those world travels, when you're out of your comfort zone, they really are incredible experiences. You learn a lot, you have some fun, but is there one that jumps out to you?
Absolutely. It's actually funny that, we're talking on the same day. So with my family, when I was probably about 10 years old, we would travel to Italy every summer for about 3 weeks during the summer. After summer baseball and before school started, there was a little pocket of time. And we probably went there 8, 9 consecutive summers in a row. So that was kind of like a childhood stomping grounds of mine, like a place that I vividly remember. So many great memories on the beach, and Rome, spending so much time there with my mom and my aunts. So I got to see so much, the culture, diverse people, the language, the food, the arts, the churches, the museums. But I was with my family. And then I was fortunate enough, after my 8th grade year, going into my 9th grade year, and then after my 9th grade year, going into my sophomore year in high school, I did an internship program. This organization called CISV, Children's International Summer Villages. Family friend of ours had their kids involved, and basically a way to get kids from all over the world, from middle school age to high school age. Some of it was a week-long camp. Some of it was a 2-week interchange program where you went and lived with a family. And I just so happened to be fortunate enough to do a 4-week interchange and live with a family in Rome. And the young man that I lived with, and to this day, he's one of my best friends. I literally just got off of WhatsApp, like FaceTime with him, checking in on him, obviously during these hard times. But a guy that was in my wedding, that came to my home opener as a head coach in Memphis, that has been one of my best friends. He's my Italian brother. And that experience to be able to go to a place that I loved, I've been so many times before, but to see it from a different lens, to see it through another, fellow 14, 15-year-old kid, and then to go explore on our own, not have adults around, because he clearly knew the town. It was his hometown. To go and see the side of my probably favorite place in the world through a different lens and different experiences and friendships that were created and so many great memories. That's something that to this day, like I talked about a moment ago, that I can't wait for my kids to get to experience. Hopefully there's an interchange program that offers them an opportunity to go explore the world through a different lens. Live with someone, live with a family, gain an appreciation for a different culture. One of my older boys, who's 19, a couple of years ago, he actually went to Costa Rica and did a similar interchange program, and it kind of changed his life, his perspective on life, and his appreciation for all the things he has, and relationships that he has with fellow teenagers in their college years now, even 3 years later, that'll probably carry on for a lifetime. So that experience really meant the world to me, because it gave me friendships beyond just the United States, and it got me to expose, in a different way to another culture that, I cherish so deeply.
And I guess, basketball has become even more and more a global game. So I imagine that,
Yes.
that allows you to connect with people and just have an understanding of, where some of these people come from.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny that you actually just brought that up. I'm actually in my office right now, and I'm staring at a picture right in front of me, and it's of me and my friend. His name's Mattia Marini, and we used to play in a 3-on-3 basketball tournament in Italy, in this small little port city called Porto Santo Stefano. And it was at the end of July, early August, and the whole town would descend on basically the plaza near the water. They'd put 2 hoops up, and you just sign up for a 3-on-3 team, and you go out there, play over the course of 2 days. And he was a big soccer, volleyball nut, never had played basketball in his life, but he strapped him up. We went out there, had some fun, and, to obviously, as I said, for him to come to my head coaching debut at home this season in Memphis, kind of brought it all full circle. So definitely an appreciation. It was fun learning about their passion for basketball as much as the NBA is here. But as you said, such a global game, and it only continues to grow.
Now, you mentioned baseball before we really kind of dive down the basketball path. If I'm not mistaken, Cubs fan, is that correct?
Yeah, I probably go more broad. Definitely, if I had to pick a team, I'm Cubs/Rangers, which I know is not a fair answer. People jump me on that one. I'm just a baseball fan. I grew up. I was a huge Cal Ripken Jr. fan. The Iron Man, his endurance, his just love, and obviously his skill. Followed him so much. Had jersey signed. He was a guy that I really looked up to. With my playing shortstop as well and third base, similar to him. But, then I became a Red Sox fan because of Pedro Martinez, because I pitched, and, then the Rangers, because that was my hometown team, and they had obviously started playing well. So a little bit of a bandwagoner, so to speak. But I just love going to baseball stadiums. I collect a hat from every single baseball park, and I'm a little over halfway. I've got some more work to do. But, just cherish those memories to go check out ballparks and, America's pastime. Again, my favorite sport growing up, so many great memories playing on the field, and now to be able to go and share it, with my family, my friends, my little ones. It's awesome. But the Cubs has got a soft place. I love Wrigley Field, probably my favorite, ballpark. And my grandfather on my dad's side actually grew up in Chicago, so my dad and my brother and I make a yearly trip out of it. We go up to Chicago, pay, honor and tribute to my grandfather, but we get to go have our Jenkins boys trip, as we call it, Jenkins men's trip, have some fun and goof off in Chicago, and no better place than Wrigley Field.
It's the most special ballpark in Major League Baseball, in my opinion. It's an unbelievable place. All right, so let's talk a little basketball. You mentioned your love of so many different activities. Growing up, I'm just curious. Were you drawn at all to the Mavs? Was there any part of the Mavs growing up, whether it was Dirk or the Finley, Nash, Dirk era, anything like that really helped connect you with basketball, or was it just a general love of the sport?
So really, I mean, I think back to when I was in fifth and sixth grade. I really started doing more basketball camps. I was going to basketball camps every summer. Branching out, not just being a one sport athlete. And that I was growing up in the era of Michael Jordan and the Bulls, and obviously with the Last Dance on right now. It's cool to go back and just see all those, historic moments and games and the teams. And I was actually a big time Tony Kukoc fan and would, try to emulate him in the court because, I was kind of a taller white kid that shot with his left hand. It's like, hey, there's a guy that I can maybe look up to in Kukoc. So I kind of got into basketball just through, fandom and then playing the sport and the energy that it took to go out there and compete, nonstop, offense, defense, back and forth. I just love the flow of the sport. And then I started going to games, being in Dallas, back in Reunion Arena before, American Airlines Center was built. We'd go to, a number of games a season, as you mentioned, Nash and Finley and obviously Dirk. Dirk, one of my favorite players growing up. But, even the Triple J's, I caught a tail end of them. And then we got into the Dirk era with Nash and Finley. And then, moving over to AAC, my mom and I actually became partial season ticket holders. So, 20 plus times a year, we'd go to games. She got that for me about midway through high school. And that just became such a fun experience for my mom and I to share. Sometimes I would take a buddy of mine or one of my aunts. And, even to this day, going back and competing there, whether it was as an assistant coach and obviously recently is my first time going back as a head coach. So special being able to look up there in the third deck where my mom and I used to watch so many games and see the Mavericks go to the finals in 2006. I know it didn't turn out the way that, the Mavericks wanted, but then to even watch them as I was getting my start with the San Antonio Spurs, back in 2011 is, when the Mavs won their title, which was so cool. All those memories from Reunion Arena to the AAC, all the players that came, all the great teams, the great coaches, definitely a special place. And it was cool to see how, just the fandom of the Bulls got me kind of thinking about the game and wanting to play the game. And then to be able to go in my own market to watch the Mavericks and see how they just kind of just boomed. And, what Mark Cuban and the ownership group did to get the Mavericks on the map was awesome, to bring the right players and coaches in. That really got me even more in love with the sport. And, very fortunate now to say this has been part of that journey.
And when did you decide that this was something you wanted to pursue? Because I read something, your high school coach, Scott Jolly, a guy against whom I played, who, a really successful coach before he decided to move on. He said that he didn't necessarily know when you were playing for him that you wanted to become a coach. So when did you decide, whether it was coaching or front office stuff, that you really wanted to pursue basketball more than just, some hobby and passion, but as something you wanted to do professionally?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think about that often and get that asked often. It's always been a dream of mine to coach basketball. And when I say that, it doesn't necessarily mean the NBA. I mean, it was at any level. Coaching youth kids when I was in high school, or, obviously we started a basketball league when I was in college, which was one of the highlights of my college career. And then, obviously I have to figure out what my career trajectory is. But even when I was in high school, I had visions of maybe getting into the educational system and being a teacher and an advisor and coaching basketball or coaching baseball, doing something along those lines just to teach and, teach on the field as well. But when it really came to light to say, this is probably something I really, really want to pursue, was Christmas break of my junior year. I've got this business degree that I'm working for, and I'm not confident that going to Wall Street was probably the best fit for me. I had to pursue something else, and I didn't really know what it would be. But really, at the end of the day, trying to figure out, okay, how can I live maybe not a dream right off the bat, but just follow my passions. Is there a way I can get into the sports world because I'm so passionate about sports and I've got this business degree? It was like, how can I get into business? And I was fortunate enough, grandmother on my mother's side, kind of my step-grandmother, she knew the owner of the Spurs, knew Peter Holt. Peter Holt gave me my first opportunity. So did, R.C. Buford, got in on the front office side. And as I tell, people that are aspiring to get into business, any opportunity is a great opportunity just to get in, get your feet wet. Who knew that I was going to get into coaching? I thought about being a high school coach way down the line, maybe when I was retired from just working a normal job or And then I am there for a year, and I'm around Pop, and I'm around Tim Duncan, and this great team, this great organization, and the blood was just boiling inside me that, man, I've always wanted to teach. I've always wanted to coach. Like, is there an opportunity even now at such an early age in my career? Never thought there was going to be this concrete path that said this is the way you're going to go. And that's, the sports world. There's so many different paths and avenues and twists and turns. I took a leap of faith, and there was an opportunity with Austin, and I was able to go for it and knew that, hopefully I could make something of it because I loved basketball. I love to teach. I love to learn. That, maybe I could turn this into something. Did I have aspirations of being a head coach one day in the G League or, the NBA? Of course, but I never, put that in front, said this has got to happen. It's, make or break pathway. Let me just enjoy this opportunity. And I've been so fortunate to work with great people, great organizations, and great players that have prepared me to continue to follow this passion of mine that has obviously turned into a dream job.
I want to ask you about your time with the Spurs and the G League and, on the professional side. Before we do that, I want to ask you two things about your time at Penn.
Of course.
First of all, so you mentioned business, and I thought maybe I read that specifically you were studying econ, but whatever the case, even though you maybe didn't pursue what your degree was directing you towards, Penn's an incredible school. Wharton, obviously, specifically an incredible school. Is there anything from your education there that maybe you utilize, or just an experience from there that you feel like maybe has still influenced you as you are in a totally different walk of life?
Yeah. So I was pursuing a psychology degree, and there's the study of, behaviors and humans, and, decided, let me try this business track, and ended up concentrating in management. And, it'd be hard for me to say there's one maybe, lesson or lecture or key trait that I apply to this day, which you're like, man, you all that money was spent on that education. But the totality of the experience in that environment prepares you for life after. The competitive environment, it was something that's always driven me in my life, and that was the best situation for me to be amongst other, just intelligent people that are striving to, excel in academic, arenas to prepare for, careers after college life. But probably the biggest thing, especially that I thought that Wharton does an amazing job, is so many of their courses are team-centric. That, yes, there's the lecture portion, but there's so much project-based learning that's done within a team scope. So whether it was a management course, finance course, marketing course, legal studies, statistics, accounting, pretty much I would say well over half of the courses you took, you'd have to break off into smaller groups, work on projects, work on presentations, and within those, groups, you're having to define roles and responsibilities, everything from, a vision of the group, your timelines, the end product. It just prepared you to work in what most people end up doing in their careers, whether it's in the sports field or the medical field or, in journalism. You're working a part of a team. You're part of an organization. You're part of a team more often than not. And, how you're going to be able to fit in that with, so many people that are competitively driven. That's probably one of the biggest things, that knowing that all 4 years that I was at Penn, I was exposed to that helped me really transition. And yes, that's not just one course or one lecture or a textbook or a teacher. It was the totality, which I think really prepares you. And I know that's becoming more commonplace in college, but, for Penn and Wharton to have that be at the forefront and the driving force of their education really helped prepare me to, be a part of so many teams in my career.
Now, another thing I wanted to ask you about in your time there, starting a youth league in Philadelphia. What led you to that, and what can you tell me about that and just that experience?
Probably as I said, the highlight of my college career. When I think back to my days at Penn, I cherish every moment I had. It was called PWBL, Penn West Philly Basketball League. Really close buddy of mine, Matt Einpink, from our freshman year going into our sophomore year. He and I, he's from Indianapolis, I'm from Dallas, didn't know each other. We started doing some community service work in the West Philly community our freshman year. Small organization, small outfit. And it was all more, hands-on, extra education, boosting, tutoring, English as a second language, and having fun with kids. But there was no structured athletic programs at a lot of these schools, and especially for the middle school age students. And he had a passion for wanting to create a basketball league. He linked up with myself and a couple of close buddies that we actually played intramural basketball with, and we kind of created our own little fraternity experience. None of us did the Greek life. This PWBL became our kind of fraternity experience and sorority, because it was both, men and women students, participating in this organization. And it was awesome. Got the funding from Penn. He wrote up the charter and the vision and mission, and basically did all the logistical, programming for practices and games and staffing and the tryouts and, getting the space at the gym every single week, getting more funding, the jerseys. And, obviously it became all hands on deck. We were a small group, it was all volunteer based, and he led the charge. And it was awesome to be a part of. It was, our kind of connection with so many people wanting to give back into the community, their love for basketball. As I said, it sparked off with just like an intramural basketball team, and one guy saying, let's go do something for, some kids out in West Philly and have a great experience. And it was awesome. We'd have a season in the fall, a season in the spring. Did that our sophomore, junior, senior years. And to this day, it's been awesome. I've even gotten a couple of news clippings of some of the players and, kids that we worked with that went on to go play big-time high school basketball in Philly and, go on to play in college. It's been fun to watch their growth and know that so many relationships were built just because of this, small gym, small middle school out in West Philly that brought Penn students and West Philly kids together and, obviously created a very positive and meaningful experience.
That's awesome. I want to ask you something now it's kind of an open-ended question, not necessarily leading you down a specific path, but, in your role, it really, I guess, in anybody's role, just even as a human being, you got to deal with challenges and overcoming challenges. How do you, over time, how have you learned to best approach a challenge? And I know that not every challenge is the same, but what is your typical process when a challenge is presented in front of you that's not just a snap of the finger fix, and you've got to figure out a way to overcome it, whether it's by yourself or with a group?
Honestly, patience. Like you said, you can face obstacles in, the fast speed moments of a basketball game or in life that, a lot of times are unforeseen. You can prepare as much as you want. I think there's a lot of preparation that goes involved in being able to handle a lot of different situations and applying your best expertise on your experiences prior to that, the knowledge you've gained from, your own study, but a lot of times that's because of studying others and learning from others. And then there's times where you're probably not prepared, and it's a patience that, you trust that you put in work, you've done preparation, but if there's something you don't know, you're going to seek out the right guidance. And I think, that's something that I cherish a lot is, let's take my work environment, for example, coaching staff. How often we meet together and when challenges arise, whether it's basketball related or team related or life related, we're all there for each other. And I think if you can take on the mentality that you don't have all the answers, I think that's something that I like to quote myself is you don't have all the answers. And, hopefully you have enough to, provide a good answer or provide a good solution. But if you don't, seek out the guidance of those who you surround yourself with or you're fortunate enough to work with. And the same can be applied to your personal life. Obviously I'm married to my best friend. We're going to be going on 7 years now this summer, and our friendship and the challenges that we've individually faced and as a family, everyone goes through it. And it's not just at work, it's in your personal lives, your family lives. If you can be dependent on others and know that, there are going to be some tough times, you prepare for it. I think that gives you just a mentality and a strength to be able to handle it. So life's going to throw a lot of different things at you. Basketball's going to throw a lot of different things at you. But faith in your preparation, faith in knowing that you may not know everything, you're going to seek it out, figure it out. That's why I love the beauty of a team. I love talking about teams so much because I think there's a reliance on each other because we all benefit from each other. And if you embrace that mentality, that you can do it all together, you can overcome so much. And, unfortunately, us as a world, country, NBA, all different levels going through tough, unprecedented times right now with a, pandemic. let's rely. You keep hearing the word together, 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 and I think that is so applicable to what we're going through right now. And it's something that, you can't always prepare for, but when it does, you seek out, refuge and safety and solutions together. And it's fun to see how many people are rallying at different levels. It's within their own families. It's within their own organizations. It's countries. It's states. There is no answer sometimes, and you just got to figure it out together.
All right, now I want to get to the G League. And Taylor, I appreciate you sharing that. I know it's kind of a random question there and very open-ended, but I appreciate you sharing your philosophy on that.
Of course.
Okay, so I'm the scouting report on Taylor Jenkins is that he is very organized. Can you confirm?
Yes,
okay.
I can definitely confirm. To a fault sometimes.
What's that?
To a fault sometimes, for sure.
So I don't have a lot of strengths, but I think that organization would be one of them. So I think maybe I know what you went through with this, and I guess it's just the period of time we live in where technology is so important to us. But I think I heard when you were in the G League, your laptop caught fire or something, and I just know that like one of my biggest fears is my laptop just crashes and I lose everything because I got so much on there. What happened? How did your laptop set on fire, and how did you kind of recover from that?
Yeah, nightmare scenario for sure. Definitely when you take organization to probably a extreme level like I do sometimes. I don't want to go as far as saying your entire life's on that laptop, but all your work and, I used the line preparations on there. So I was grinding away for sure, watching a lot of film, working on a scout report for, I think, an upcoming game. Luckily, it was 2 days later. It wasn't the very next day, or I'd have been in some deep water there. But I think the engine, whatever the processor was, got overheated for so much use. And I was sitting in my recliner in my apartment. I was getting ready to go to bed, close the laptop. We had practice the next day, so I was packing up, my bag just to get ready for the morning. Go, do all my pre-nighttime stuff, routine, and I'm getting ready to lay in bed, and I start smelling some kind of just off odor, and I couldn't really make sense of it. It wasn't like burning food, but I could tell it was like some kind of burning scent. And I start walking into my living room, small little living room, and I'm kind of not seeing any smoke, not noticing anything. And I just happen to look down at the bag that I just prepared, 20 minutes before, and I'm starting to smell the odor even stronger. And as I reach down, literally smoke starts coming out of the bag. And I guess probably not the smartest move, but I decided to open the bag and wonder what the heck's going on. And I see the smoke coming off, and I'm start moving the bag. And as I'm moving the bag closer to the sliding glass door to my balcony, it engulfs in flames. Now, I'm not talking like, a movie scene where the windows explode and the fire is going out and my eyebrows are charred. But it definitely took a little bit of a burst there, which caught me off guard. Immediately kind of kicked it out into the balcony, went to get the fire extinguisher. I'm in panic mode. I call a 911. Probably not the smartest move, just for like a little flare up. But I had to come out. I mean, the carpet was charred. There was definitely a bad smell. I had to contact the apartment company. I slept in my buddy's apartment that night, but the laptop was gone and all the work was gone. And subsequently, I don't want to say luckily, but I've had one other incident, not to that extreme, but where your laptop crashes. And now I am a maniac when it comes to putting stuff on multiple hard drives, good old Dropbox.
Yeah.
Anytime I do a report or a document, I mean, I'm backing up my hard drive once a week, sending stuff on Dropbox, just because the inevitable technology, as great as it is, sometimes it gives out on you. And it's the last position you want to be in. So definitely a keeper of a lot of files in my career, and I want to make sure I don't lose them in the future.
All right, Taylor, I don't know if this is something that annoys you. I'm sure you get asked it a lot, and I'm sure it's not something you necessarily want to be defined by. But I think one of the things that stands out is that you're an NBA head coach without even playing in college. And I'm curious, not just what the challenges are, but what are some of the benefits of that? Different perspective, maybe different experiences, and how do you, I guess, approach your job knowing that is your background?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a unique background. I've recognized that early on, and I definitely think it does, present opportunities. I think the great thing is everyone in pro sports, for example, but let's talk NBA, can come from a different pathway. So if you can understand that and know that there's not one cookie cutter pathway, you can still make a positive experience. You can still make headway and get to where you hopefully want to go one day. But also recognizing you're fortunate enough to be in this industry and to be in the NBA. For me, it's obviously recognizing that, okay, well, I played as far as high school basketball and played a little intramural here. Well, that's not screaming, NBA head coach. But it gave me the opportunity to say, okay, well, if I don't have those playing experiences that I can fall back on, or whether it was being a grad assistant that turned into a scout or a player development coach in even college, which so many coaches have coming up, or, I didn't come from a lineage of NBA coaches or, families, that I had to go about it a different way. And that was just embracing a different pathway to get into where I wanted to go. It was like all coaches do, regardless of what your pathway is, but making more of, for me, having to spend more time learning the game of basketball and investing myself in my craft, and recognizing probably the most important thing that all of us coaches do is just show care for others, and especially when it comes to your players, building those relationships and going, all right, well, I don't have the relationships that many people are accustomed to, having grown up in AAU and college ball, that I'm going to have to do it in a unique way. I'm going to have to show my passion for the game, my passion for caring for players a little bit differently, and even go even farther in those respects. So I definitely thought it was an opportunity that I never looked at it as a hindrance or wondered would people accept me. Obviously people would figure out my background, but hopefully when they talked about I'm only talking about Taylor Jenkins, third person, whatever, is that they knew that I was just a guy that was passionate about basketball, that loved teaching and cared for just putting in the work and wanting to help others. And that just makes you a really good coach. And I see that in so many coaches that I've worked with that have come from all different backgrounds that embrace that philosophy of just caring and putting in the work and trying to just teach and learn from others at the same time. Not, as a coach, I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything. And I enjoy learning from others. And I think that was something I embraced really early on in my career, of knowing that even though I'm probably going to have to go a different pathway, I can still make headway in just doing probably the core things that matter at the end of the day when it comes to being a really good coach.
Taylor, earlier you talked about your time with the Spurs, and they, not just in the NBA, but probably in all of sports, one of the model franchises. And, Greg Popovich is so highly regarded. You also spent a lot of time with Mike Budenholzer, with whom you coached in Milwaukee prior to going to Memphis. And, we always hear about, the way the Spurs go about things. And, I'm sure Coach Bud carried some of that with him to Milwaukee. And I'm sure a lot of that is still kind of in your head. How do you, though, blend the influences, whether it's with the Spurs or, any experience, with who you are and what's maybe important to you and putting your own touch on it? How do you go about, I guess, combining all those flavors?
I think that's a great question. I think, it's an evolution. I always talk about finding your coaching voice. I think everyone, when I finally decided I wanted to coach, even when I was talking about being a junior in high school, saying I wanted to coach one day, that was probably an idea that was propped up because of my love for the sport, the experiences I had even had as a player, and seeing all the other coaches around me. What drove them every single day to teach, and you just pick up things as you go along. But you kind of, at the end of the day, at its core, know who you are and what you believe in. But along that journey, as you've mentioned, so many great coaches I've worked for, and I also talk about all the assistant coaches that I've worked for. I've learned so much from them as well in my time in San Antonio and Atlanta and Milwaukee, and even now with the current staff we have here in Memphis, that you just evolve, that your coaching voice is in there somewhere in your heart. It's your heart of hearts, but you're just going to add layers to it. You're going to test your coaching voice as you learn from other people. Do you agree with that person? Do you like what they do? Is that something you want to implement in your own style, whether it's X's and O's related? It's how you handle player development. What's your integration in analytics? The sports medicine boom. How people do that, how people utilize it, how do they speak it at the end of the day? And, there's plenty of times, it's easy, I tell this to so many young coaches, it's easy to look at the people around you, especially, the coaches you're learning from, and say, oh, I want to emulate so-and-so. I want to do exactly what they did. It's a drill they did. It's their tone of voice. It's how they handle a coaching staff, how they speak, how they manage in a game situation, whatever it is as it relates to coaches. Also remember the things you don't want to do. Remember the things you're like, you know what, I didn't really like, how that situation was handled, or, I didn't really like that play from A to Z, everything on the board that coaches deal with every single day. Always remember the things that you kind of want to emulate or the things that you don't want to emulate. And I think that just kind of tests that, in your heart of hearts, your core coaching voice that, starts at the beginning and travels with you through your journey. It's going to get tested along the way. It's going to evolve, or it's going to stay the same, or you may switch gears and go a different pathway. That's why so many people talk about it's always great to get different exposures to other people that are in your craft, because it's going to test you. It's going to help you evolve and grow, but along what you believe in at the end of the day and what you have at your core. Does that align with it? Is that going to challenge it for the better, or maybe challenge it for the worse, and you don't want to go that path? That's what's fun as a coach. And I think, we operate in seasons. Every season is a different story, but I think even every day is a different opportunity to grow and evolve. And I can absolutely say at my core, there's so many things I learned from my days in San Antonio with Coach Pop. And, we carried so much of that, with Coach Bud to Atlanta and then on to Milwaukee. But we evolved ourselves on and off the floor as coaches. And that's what's been a fun journey for me, to know that at my core I aligned so much with everyone there. But along that journey, I picked up some new things to really elevate myself as a coach and as a teacher of the game, a student of the game. And hopefully now as a head coach, even as an assistant, you hope you're doing the same thing. You're imparting that same, wisdom on others to help them challenge their coaching voice and coaching philosophies to be the best version of themselves as they can be. And, our ultimate job is to do that with our players. And the things that I learned with, Tim, Tony, Manu, and all the great Spurs, to, Al, Horford, Paul Millsap, Corver, Jeff Teague, DeMar Carroll, all those great players in Atlanta. It's obviously the great players in Milwaukee. Hopefully I'm doing something along similar philosophy here in Memphis as we develop these great players here.
When you say coaching voice, that stands out, because as a broadcaster, I think one of the challenges, especially when you get started, is figuring out how to take your natural personality off air and apply it when the red light's on. And for whatever reason, there's something about that red light that just it makes it a little tougher than it might seem. And so when you talk about coaching voice, I kind of think about that, and I'm just curious, was there what was the process of finding your coaching voice? Or was there maybe a moment where you're like, this is really starting to click, and I'm figuring out what my coaching voice is? And I know, for people listening, I'm not talking about the tone of your voice or the pace, but I think I know what you're saying when you're talking about coaching voice, and I was just curious about that.
Yeah, and coaching voice, obviously can be, like you just talked, it can be the tone, it can be how you deliver messages and what you teach. But at the end of the day, I also like to say coaching voice encapsulates what you believe in. What are your beliefs in all areas as it comes to being a coach? And to me, it's going back to, the raw coaching voice I had when I was coaching middle school kids, when I was in high school for a small season, and then going, we talked about the PWBL at Penn, and just kind of just going with the flow and just going out there and just trying to compete and just, enjoy being a coach. There was an enjoyment behind it. Still is today, 100%. But solidifying that coaching voice a little bit more, like, what's the purpose behind my coaching voice? I really think came into play. I give tons of credit to Quinn Snyder and Brad Jones, two coaches that I worked for when I was in the D League for 4 years as an assistant. They really prepared me. They taught me everything about X's and O's, player development. Working in the minor leagues is a life in itself. Handling relationships with players and coaches and agents. The basically A to Z master's degree in coaching is what I cherish, for my 4 years as an assistant. But I think during that time, it really started to click with me, because one of the great things I like to look back on is you get to make mistakes. You get to, be in a situation where it's true development. You're learning at the highest level, pro basketball, in a little bit of a smaller scale, but the expectations of honing your craft are at all-time high, because if you do want to make the NBA, like players are trying to make that jump and get that call up to the NBA, you have to pour into yourself. So I think during those 4 years, and then obviously the fifth year, I become the head coach for the Austin Toros. It really started to click. I really gained a lot of confidence in what I believed in, not just how I presented or ran drills or did scouting reports. What I believed in really started coming to fruition. And then I always like to give credit to Bud, because he just elevated this young coach that has poured a lot into his development, but now he's got to take it to the highest level now at the NBA, where you really wanted to you wanted to get to. And the 6 years that I've spent with him and the coaching staff he's put together have just taken me to a whole nother level. And I'm so thankful and fortunate for that, because, even while I thought my coaching voice was becoming solidified, I knew it was going to continue to evolve and get my limits pushed even more. But through that process, through even more mistakes you make, I'm not a perfect coach. I still make mistakes to this day. It just gives you more confidence in what you believe in, what you need to work on. And that's hopefully what you carry on through the rest of your journey, is knowing that it's going to evolve all the time. And, there's probably not one final coaching voice, probably even the last coaching game that I have, but over the course of your career, you've probably had a consistency throughout what you've believed in and been able to adjust as you've gone along.
All right. One serious and two light questions for you.
None of those were serious. None of those were light. How would you grade those?
One of the things, and I talked to a number of people before this conversation, and there were a few themes, but one was leadership. And obviously, I guess that, goes without saying, if you're, a head coach and maybe have had your journey, that leadership is a strength. But the thing that stood out to me was that, people told me that you're not just a leader professionally, but just even socially and with friends, that you were kind of looked upon it in that way, and you possess those qualities very naturally. And I'm not asking you to pat yourself on the back here, but I'm curious, and I think a lot of what you've already talked about kind of goes into this, but I wanted to make sure I asked you directly, what is important to you about being a leader of men, and in this case, but men and women? What is important to you about leading people?
To me, it boils down to something very, very simple. And the two words that immediately jump to mind are relationships and care. Care, you could also substitute love. Is that whatever decisions you have to make as a leader, whatever role you serve as a leader, whatever guidance you have to provide as a leader, whatever accountability and tough decisions you have to, encounter as a leader, there needs to be a relationship, a strong relationship. And those don't happen overnight. There has to be an investment in relationships and professionally and personally. And that's what's exciting. That's what I love about coaching is, yes, there's end results that happen on the court and, the final scores and the win-losses and the championships and, the plays that you draw up and all those great things that come into coaching. But what's the love and care that you put into those relationships with the people that you work for? Today, one of our assistants, Neil Ivey, was just announced as the Notre Dame women's head coach. Beyond excited for her. And, we just started building our relationship in a short amount of time, but I know that we're going to continue to carry that one on even further. And as a leader, it's to develop others. It's to support others. And, she's just a prime example of someone that I've built a great relationship with, but she's done that with so many people here in Memphis. And if you take on the heart of just saying, I'm going to build relationships, quality, great relationships with people, and then show them that I care and I love them. And you're going to go about that a lot of different ways, tactically, visually, whatever it is, on the floor, off the floor, in formal situations, informal situations, in the games, out of the games, on the plane, at a dinner, a casual social environment, whatever that is. If you can just find ways to continue to build those relationships and show that there's an authenticity behind how you care for them, that I think gets reciprocated. And I think that ultimately separates people and organizations that can go on and really do great things on and off the floor, honestly.
All right. So I before we get to the two light ones, I just want to thank you again for sharing a lot of this. And I can tell just, you put care and effort into the answers, and I really do appreciate that, Taylor.
No, thank you. I appreciate you taking the time as well. This has been a great conversation.
All right, and thank you. All right, Ludacris, go. I'm told you're a big Ludacris fan.
Yeah, I mean, Ludacris, for me, jumped on the scene when I was in middle school. Actually, my roommate in college, he and I, the Fast and Furious movies and, Roll Out and, I'm not going to say the bad word, but move, blank, get out the way. And, there's even my wife and I, sometimes on road trips, we'll blast some Jason Aldean, being, when we lived in Georgia, country became a popular, type of music for us. But there's a remix with Jason Aldean and Ludacris. I'll just leave it at that. You got to go look it up. One of the hottest songs. But, man, he's got the swag. He's obviously got the look, multi-talented artist. And definitely some childhood memories and middle school, young boy, teenage memories, bumping into a lot of his tracks.
You ever met him?
Never met him. Never had the chance, but I know when we were in Atlanta, he came to about a handful of games, but never got to personally meet him. So maybe one day. One day.
All right. And then the last thing, you kind of touched on this when you said you collect hats, but I was told that just in general that you have an impressive memorabilia collection, and I'm just curious what maybe the most prized or unique item that you might have in that collection, or just one that kind of jumps to mind.
Wow. If I can, I'll give you two. I've got all kinds of stuff, personal, professional, fandom. I've got a ticket stub from national championship game, Rose Bowl, Texas versus USC. My best friend and I were in the building at the Rose Bowl to witness Texas take down USC. It was back in 2006, one of the best sporting events I've ever been to. I've got a big frame with a panoramic shot of the Rose Bowl with a ticket there. So great experience. So I definitely had to memorialize that one. And then personally, I've got these two cool pictures of my two younger kids, Austin and Avery, when they were newborns. And it's me with a backdrop holding a basketball, and everything's blacked out except my arms and my hands. And I'm holding an NBA basketball, and they are not clothed, fully naked, laying over the basketball as little babies. And my daughter's got her little pink bow, and they're off to the left of my desk, and it just shows, the beauty of having kids and how much they've meant to me. And those are like art pieces that I've very much hold dear to my heart.
Now, you mentioned the Texas USC. I guess he's your boss. Zach Kleiman went to USC, and I know this because Zach was the president of I think it was the Sports Business Association at USC when I was a freshman there. Do you ever make sure to show him, that ticket stub and remind him of how that game went down?
I haven't pulled that card out yet. I think both of our schools that we've rooted for have some work to do. So we got to get back to prominence down in Austin and out in LA, and then it'd be great to see those two teams battle it out. And we'll definitely bring that card out and say, remember the last time we played in a big-time game, I think we won. I think we even won in the regular season. We played a little home and home a couple of years ago. So I'll bring it out, but haven't had to pull that card out yet.